Hello, everyone, and welcome to another exciting episode of The Lion's Den. I'm your host, Venezia Leone, and today I sat down with Randy Johnston, who is the CEO and founder of Network Management Group and an executive VP at K2 Enterprises. Both companies work with accounting firms and provide technology-related consulting services. In our conversation today, Randy explains how he has been within the accounting technology industry for decades. He talks about challenges that he had with growing and scaling, how people are really the most important piece of the formula to success. We talk a lot about AI, agentic AI, how these things are impacting accounting technology specifically, but even more broader, technology and businesses as a whole. And he kind of rounds it out by giving us some philosophies of leadership that he has stuck by and reflected on over his decades of experience. Randy is really awesome, one of the most impressive, people in technology that I've personally ever met. And I think you'll really enjoy hearing what he has to say. Hey, Randy, we're so excited to have you on the podcast today. One of the things I'm really interested in diving into with you is this intersection of accounting and technology. You've spent 4 decades at the forefront of this. What first drew you to this space?
Well, thank you for having me today, and greetings to all you and all your listeners. It was pretty straightforward. I wanted to have the ability to leverage technology to impact as many people as possible. And when you consider that accountants generally are affecting 75 to 125 downstream businesses, if I could affect one accountant, I had indirect impact on a lot of businesses and a whole bunch of people. So it was really about leverage. And the accounting draw really was accidental, I would say. I did a lot of compute early on, and I wrote a lot of accounting platforms. But what that did was it drew me deeper and deeper into accounting software, which then led into other areas like document management and workflow and so on. So this just kept getting broader and broader, even though I was narrowing more and more into accounting.
Yeah, it's interesting when you find yourself pursuing a space that isn't necessarily directly related to your goal, but fits into it so nicely that you decide, I guess I'll hang around here for my career.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's been somewhat like that. But one little twist on this is I had always considered, and still do, that doing the same thing repetitively is way too boring. So people say you should focus in one area and stay there. And I'm the opposite on that. So not only have I dealt with accounting firms, but pretty much businesses of all major industries. So manufacturing, distribution, not-for-profit, construction, and so forth. And what happens is I take what I know and take it to the clients in those different areas, leverage what I know, pick up things from them and leverage that somewhere else. So I've had this kind of continuous moving from one type of industry to another. It goes in cycles. I can see it. Now, public practice accounting firms, that's stayed pretty consistent for 45, I hate to actually say it at this point, 50 plus years at this point, because I started dealing with public practice accounting firms in the 72 window. But, the technology itself, though, is longer, because I started dealing with technology in the early 60s. So, when I think about the arc of when things happened, I wrote my first artificial intelligence on Lisp in 1975. So I've been doing artificial intelligence for 50 years. So it's been really fascinating to watch all these things evolve and help them where I can.
Absolutely. So I want to dive in a little bit to your expertise in that journey. What was the state of, maybe you can be specific in kind of tech and accounting when you started, or maybe just technology in general versus now? And what do you feel like has changed the most since then?
Mm-hmm. And at the risk of being a little too historical and irrelevant, tech in those early days was mainframe computers and mini computers. We didn't have personal computers at all. So, an accounting firm that would have the vision to buy a mini computer, System 32s and 34s were very common in those time frames. And those were $35, $50, $100,000 decisions. So it wasn't taken lightly, if you will, at the time. But it was pretty clear that these big systems software was not all that great. So there was a lot of innovation around the accounting software on those platforms. And then as personal computers started to arrive, it was clear there was going to be a lot of innovation in those areas. So to my knowledge, and I think I'm correct in this statement, I actually wound up with the very first IBM PC in the state of Kansas back in August of 81. And I wound up with the very first compact luggable, which was a sewing machine sized affair in 1983. And so every step of the way where there's been a new piece of technology, I've been privileged enough to get early access to it, sometimes before it was released, but many times after. And so then what happened is at that point in time with the small personal computers, obviously it was DOS character based. And so as the Windows and networking evolution was occurring, it was interesting to see each of those additions. Now, I won't call the vendor by name, but I was actually talking about them just last week in the context of a question, because I mentioned that this particular vendor had a DOS piece of software, and they said something to the effect of only a fool would want to run accounting in Windows or in a graphical interface. And so it's like, yeah, I don't think you're right on that, but we'll come back and talk to you in a year or two. And it turns out they said, how did you know people would adopt these graphical interfaces? So then as we progressed into hosting and software as a service products running in browsers and so forth, it's been fascinating to watch each of those steps. And it just so happens that the latest step is this AI enablement of a lot of these platforms.
Yeah, absolutely. You're definitely seeing that in every industry, in every technology. How do we maximize our use of AI and all of that?
Yep.
So I'd love, especially for our listeners, but also for me who might not be very familiar with accounting tech or your businesses and network management group and K2 Enterprises. Can you talk us through a little bit of what those businesses are? And then kind of the second part to the question is maybe some challenges you've faced when you've tried to grow them.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so Venezia, that's actually a nifty question, and I will fork it to handle it with NMGI and with
Perfect.
K2. And I actually have other businesses too, but I'm going to keep it on those two. So we'll start with NMGI because I'm coming to you from my NMGI office today. And this business is 42 years old this year. And we support CPA firms 24/7 from Boston to Honolulu. So we take care of all of the infrastructure updates and so forth from afar, and sometimes go on site to do work, but we also have a hosting service as well. And that business had to transition from kind of standalone computers to networks, uh, to the remote tools, which really became good enough to make things work right in about 2007. And of course, email became kind of a big thing. So we actually wrote a platform to do spam control, which we grew up to have uh, tens of thousands of people on that platform and sold it, which was a nifty innovation at the time, and glad to be rid of it when we sold it because of the heavy risk, because bad actors were attacking things. But we had to evolve the talent more from sales and repair work into strategic advice and
Mm,
consulting and very complex installations. So
mm,
it's an interesting arc because about every decade things have had to be changed, and you have to make a pretty big jump when you make those decades changes in the business. In other words, it can't stay the same, and you've got to have the discipline to say, I like the old way of doing it. Novell Network would be an example, but this Windows networking thing is a big deal. Oh, Windows networking was fun, but there's a lot more SaaS and security. That's the type of transition there. Now, in the K2 business, on the other hand, uh, that business produces roughly 1,600 events a year to about 100,000 CPAs in the US and Canada. It's pretty big scale. There's about 20 or so of our instructors that produce these events in lots of different locations. So I'll probably produce 4 or 5 events remotely this week, but I was on site in San Diego last week producing a lot of events. So that business, though, has evolved from a very largely in-person seminar type of business, in some cases hands-on, where we would actually carry the computers in and teach people how to do things. Trust me, in the early days, it was fascinating to have a UPS, literally a battery backup, in my checked luggage or in my carry-on uh, garment bag. It actually was most of the time, but we would carry multiple servers, multiple workstations, the UPS, a whole network that we would set up in the field and use projection. So it used to be we carried a heck of a lot of equipment with us. Then it became more and more application centric. So when we were teaching accountants how to use, Microsoft Windows, which I'm a designer of, and Microsoft Office, which I'm a designer of, or doing QuickBooks, small business accounting, or Zero, of which I'm designers of both of those products as well. So, you would basically learn about a product and teach the product. So you had this interesting mix of forward vision, trying to identify all of the latest technologies that were going to be important and teach our attendees how that it would affect accounting. So that happened with almost every technology along the way. So just to pull in more recent ones, blockchain, which is 15 years old, smartphones, which is about the same age. We did cell phones before that, but that type of technology. And if we go to newer pieces like the AI, we have to try to forecast what's going to be important. So, for example, quantum computing today is still a fairly hot topic because people know it's coming, they know it's important, but they don't understand very much about it. So, it's our job to take relatively complex technology and explain the business application and how it works in accounting.
Yeah. That's really interesting that do you find that a lot of your kind of the new emerging technologies and their capabilities are applicable to most accounting firms?
Generally, the emerging technologies universally has application,
Cool.
almost without exception. And the way to think about that is it may be used in the firm directly. Okay, that's nice. But their clients downstream have to
Mm.
deal with it. So there is no profession, no industry that the accountants are excluded from. Now, they may choose not to participate in a particular industry, but for example, there are accounting firms that specialize in not for profit, or there's accounting firms that specialize in healthcare or manufacturing or distribution. And you can see that if you specialize in distribution, for example, you better know about supply chains and RFID tags and all those things that make a particular industry work. And the more you know about the downstream industry that you're supporting, the more valuable you are to a client. See, it's not really so much about tax and audit, which, public practice, that's a lot of it. But today could also involve client accounting services and, frankly, another 25 or so services that I could name. So the question is, what's interesting to you? What do your clients need? And then how do you apply it? So you have to really reflect on these various pieces of technologies and say, oh, yeah, I see where that could be used. Today there's a lot of struggle about how do I profitably and securely deploy AI? Well, that's a good question to ask and answer. And I think largely for many industries, that's still not exactly answered. It's kind of new. So the accountant and the downstream client are learning more or less at the same time. Now, flip it upside down for just a minute. Accounting professionals, CPAs in specific, are often in industry at very high levels. A common title is CEO, CFO, VP of Finance, Controller, and so forth. A lot of times they're high-end decision makers or certainly decision influencers. And if you're running an industry business of almost any size or scale, you have to understand those technologies very well. So even though you're an accountant and you maybe even are a CPA, you have responsibilities to help the business that you're helping run to run as effectively as possible with all these technologies. So we'll be simplistic with you for just a minute, Venezia. If I'm doing accounts payable, I may need to extract invoices. How do you extract invoices in the best way possible today? In the old days, you might have scanned them in and run OCR on them. But today, you're probably running an AI recognition, or you're trying to gather the invoices electronically. And then you've got a workflow of approvals. And, I won't go through all the little steps there. But those technologies, whether it's AP or payroll or accounting, or for that matter, the front end, sales and quoting and costing and inventory, all of those things are in play for industry accountants, probably even at greater detail than they are for public practice accountants.
Yeah. I don't necessarily, I don't think I ever really thought of the accountant as that kind of hub and spoke person who would be able to make those kinds of recommendations and decisions had they just had the empowerment of what all of the new technologies are and what are their applications, which it sounds like you guys are able to bring that expertise in and they're able to make those critical decisions.
I think we are able to do it, and that's because we have stayed up with all these different pieces through the years. But I don't mind disclosing to you, earlier today, I had a conversation with a large-scale CFO who was weighing out these decisions. And now that I think about it, a week ago today, before I headed out to present at the conferences, I was dealing with a fairly large-scale CFO who was trying to weigh these different things out. And it's actually a little tricky sometimes to be in accounting leadership in an industry business, because you don't know who's selling to you and who's trying to solve your problems and who's telling you the exact square truth and who's not. So vetting correct information is a real trick for most accounting professionals, whether they're in public practice or in industry. And the ratio right now, about 40% of all CPAs are in public practice and the other 60% are in industry. So that's the mix there. So the good news is, through the years, I've had the pleasure of dealing with both sides of that coin. And in the K2 business, we've actually had to keep our eye on the ball on both sides of industry and public practice. So I didn't really answer your challenge there, but the challenge was trying to stay up with all of the changes and using the actual technology and helping people understand how to select, let's say, accounting software systems. A lot of the ERPs or accounting softwares that are out there are very good marketing, but not necessarily very good at solving problems. So how do you know that you're going to get a platform that you're going to be on for 10 years and it's going to work for you? Because, if you select the wrong ERP or accounting software, it could be a career-ending move for you.
Wow. That's a heavy decision.
Yeah, it's a pretty heavy lift, and in industry, you're likely to be terminated. In fact, I actually was fascinated with statistics from the past week about the number of turnovers in CFOs, CIOs, and CISOs, because all of those are pretty volatile positions, and there is fiduciary risk to the CFO, particularly in public companies. They can be held personally liable and jailed for incorrect reporting.
Wow.
Yeah, it can be kind of heavy. It's like, this is lose your house conversations.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, I want to dive a little bit into AI because I feel like that is such a hot topic in, any industry, any company. How, like, from your vantage point, you've seen different technologies come through and change the game, like you mentioned, over the last 50 years.
Yep.
How, like, what's your interpretation of how AI is changing accounting workflows? And I want to maybe dive even more specifically into agentic AI and how you think that's going to reshape, firms and clients and client service as we move forward.
Yeah, so let's think about this together for a minute, because I am lucky enough to have the long arc and some fairly heavy technical background, because it turns out I'm the original designer of the accounting format in Excel and pivot tables in Excel.
Great.
And Excel's 40 years old this year, so that's like ancient history. Now, when it comes to the AI, the way I'm looking at it is 3 tiers. First, the basic frontier models. I consider those really productivity platforms. So whether it's ChatGPT or Copilot 365 or Gemini or Claude, and like Perplexity is usually the other one I'll name there. And by the way, the ones I just named are the only ones that have more than 1% market share. Everybody else has far less. And currently in my AI platform models, I've got 550 different platforms loaded. There's about 1,000 of them out there that you can access. But
Wow.
realistically, there's only a few biggies, if you will. Well, first, we're laying the layer of productivity down with one of these platforms. Public practice CPAs tend to favor the safety and indemnification that's in Copilot 365 because Microsoft actually has stated security and safety measures that are far better than, let's say, ChatGPT. Claude can get close, but can't get as strong as Copilot. Next, the vendors to the profession are incorporating AI inside their products. So, by my counts, there's 10 plus AI in tax products, probably 20 plus. There's 10 plus AI in audit products, and there's 70 plus AI in client accounting services products. So here's a whole bunch of products that have AI embedded in them. And if we look back in the end of June through middle of August timeframe, I believe there were 14 announcements of AI getting embedded into products. And between the middle of August to the middle of October, there was about another 10 or 15. And post October 15th here, I'm anticipating about another 25. So just think July 1 through, let's just say, November 15, maybe that might be, or December 1. Let's stretch it out to there because they'll all be out by that time. So in the window of a very simple 4-month period, we're going to have the better part of 50-ish products brought to market. That's a lot.
Yeah,
Okay.
wow.
Now, beyond that, the third layer that you're asking about is important in my mind, and that's the ability to run agentic AI. Now, a lot of these announcements are agents that are running inside the platforms, but I think some of the best productivity can be gained by having an agent outside that you're actually turning into your own personal assistant. And most accountants, I think, have the reading comprehension and understanding to be able to do this. You can use a workflow platform like N8N out of Germany and tie N8N to the frontier models. So you can make calls, if you will, to use ChatGPT or to use Copilot or to use Claude and get far superior results. In my own work, I've actually built agents to do a variety of tasks. And, I have a bit of a moral dilemma here, Venezia, because I have made a commitment when I write articles for publications, because I've been writing a column for 25 years for CPA Practice Advisor, or when I produce courses, those are me writing them, not some AI writing them. And it usually takes anywhere from 3 hours per contact hour. So, a 2-hour course might take me anywhere from 6 to 24 hours to write.
Wow.
But if I write an 8-hour course, minimum is going to be 24 hours, but it could easily be, much greater than that, 50 or 100 hours. And
Wow.
just to help your listeners get a flavor on that, I taught an emerging technology 2-hour course, 100-minute course in 2016, and I kept track of it. I put 1,500 hours in the one course.
Oh my
It was
God.
it was a great course to teach, and man, it was technology dense. But when I go back and look at it, I had a lot of the shots called, and a lot of those things were coming to be because it had blockchain and it had, facial recognition, and I can go down a lot of other things. But the key here is it took a lot of lift. Well, I have created an agent which can write course materials. And today I can write an 8-hour course in about 50 minutes.
Crazy. Crazy.
It's absolutely crazy. It's even crazier because your listeners have already figured out I kind of talk funny. You know, I'm a Kansas guy, so it sounds kind of, if you have me say words like root, people say, "What did you mean?" But, you know, my writing is kind of like my talking. You can see it. And when I ask these bloody agents to write, they write in my style. I can't tell it's not me writing it. Okay, so that's pretty freaky.
Yeah.
And, the question is, do I use that because that's a smart thing to do? Do I not use it? And I know that the AI agents or the AI frontier models today are not near as creative as I need them to be because through the years, every decade I've come up with a new model. And so I had the 3 PhD model that I created in the late 70s and the accounting software pyramid I created in the 80s and so forth. So I've been creating models that have stood the test of time. Well, the AI might give you a good idea, but they're not going to be creative enough typically to do it, even when you use exceptional prompts. And let's face it, agentic AI is far less prone to hallucination, and there's lots of reasons why that's the case. But I believe we'll see a lot of little agents either built and released, or we'll be building some of these ourselves. So, for example, the big publisher, CCH, is at their user conference in San Diego this year, introduced 5 agentic AI extensions of their platform. And they have a lot more coming in the pipe. And it turns out that Thomson Reuters, same type of deal. Intuit has, 4 that they introduced in QuickBooks Online in June, and 4 more that they introduced in July in Intuit Enterprise. So those agents are very interesting, doing mundane things like reconciliations or invoicing, things like that, which is cool. But there are security risks on some of these platforms. For example, Intuit does not permit opting out of using client data in their AI models. It all goes in whether you like it or not. So that's true with the QuickBooks Online data and the Intuit payroll data. So that's all going into the models with no chance of not including it.
Mm-hmm.
So I do understand the vendors that are building these big AI models, they built everything they can out of public data. Now they need private data to improve their models. So I get it. But in the US market, that is actually a violation of professional ethics, which I think is another thing to consider. We always have so many balls in accounting that we're juggling.
Mm. Yeah, it's interesting to hear, how you talk about AI can be, or the agentic AI experience can be kind of a homegrown productivity target or tool versus a system-wide agentic use that like a QuickBooks or something like that would be providing.
Mm-hmm.
So it'll be interesting to see kind of how that moves forward, and maybe there will be an emerging tech company that creates a bunch of little agents for individual productivity, and that becomes a business of its own.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, I do expect that to happen. I've seen some of those already in development. So I have a hunch that that will be the way it becomes. But if you think about cleaning up an email with ChatGPT or with Copilot's protected in the Copilot environment, not protected in the ChatGPT environment. And the license agreement of ChatGPT says if you use email to ChatGPT to tune up an email, you're supposed to disclose that in the signature lines. But most people haven't read the license agreement, don't know that. But I actually have an agent that writes email. And it's pretty interesting because, I can give it a few parameters and it'll generate a beautiful bit of email, but it's agentic. It sounds like me. There's lots of things about it that's way better than what I can do in ChatGPT or Copilot today. And we know of another platform that will release in November. That's why I said lots of products coming. That, if you want to schedule a meeting, you can simply reply, yes, WED. And the AI is smart enough to know Wednesday, and then it crafts a message and say, yes, we can review your content on Wednesday afternoon. Would 2 p.m. work for you? Because it looks at the calendar. And but for you, it was yes, WED. Poof, it creates it all.
True magic.
It is. Watch it.
So To kind of wrap up the conversation, I would love to hear a little bit about how your leadership philosophies have evolved over time, and maybe
Mm,
some, maybe a piece of advice you would give to an entrepreneur or a small business owner on how do you lead towards growth,
mhm, mhm. And I have thought about this for some time because obviously I've led multiple startup companies through the years, and I've helped a lot of startup companies that are now public. So, I mean, I've been around the game a little bit here, but um, it's going to sound real fundamental what I say here, I believe. First, people are the key, hiring the right people. And then as your team expands, staying with them and investing in the teaching and the change management. So it's the education and bringing them along because you can have a great vision, but unless you have great execution also, you won't be successful. So I've seen lots of wonderful ideas fall on their face. And I've seen some really marginal ideas be successful because they were operationalized well. But if you have great vision with great operations, now you got a real going concern, as I would see it. So it is easy to be attracted to the latest bright light, but continue to ground yourself in what's your fundamental purpose and how do I help my team understand how to achieve that. So it's that return to simplification, the education, and bringing people along through change management is kind of the magic formula. So it doesn't sound like one piece of advice, but and by the way, I don't think it's focus. A lot of people try to teach focus as that one key thing. I think when you focus too much, you've got your blinders on so heavily you can't see the opportunity around you.
Hmm.
So this is much more of a vision and sharing the vision with, you know, other people around you and having them buy into and participate in the vision. That's probably a lot more close to the sense of what I'm trying to say.
Yeah. And what I love is we've had many entrepreneurs come on the podcast, and so many of them say it's all about, do you have the right people working on the right thing with the right attitude? And being a leader to really build that up and give people the tools to do that is really the key.
Yeah, that is a consistent thing that I've seen through the years. So I agree with those other entrepreneurs. And I just happen to think that if you are working on a product, tool, service that is really focused on your customer, your client that you're trying to help. And notice I tend to be a little bit more altruistic. I'm really trying to help people all the way through this. And I think if you've built a product that is really helpful, that it has far more value than one that's maybe not so helpful. So all these technologies we're talking about, I early on discovered they could be used for good or bad. Every technology can be used for good or bad. And I'm sometimes a little too Pollyannish looking at the good stuff, not as much as I should be at the bad stuff. But it turns out I do understand the bad stuff. So, for example, quantum computing, I'm super excited about the possibilities, but I also understand the radical risk that quantum brings with, new quantum hacking and Y2Q and all that stuff, because it's kind of my job to protect you, if you will, give you the vision to get forward, but also kind of watch that you don't get blindsided.
Absolutely. Well, I know I will take your positive first view forward from this conversation, Randy. It's been such a pleasure having you on the Lion's Den. If any of our viewers want to learn more about you, obviously look further into NMG and K2 Enterprises, but also you have a podcast of your own, Accounting Technology Lab. So tune in on that. And yeah, it's been an absolute pleasure, Randy. Thanks so much.
Thank you for the invitation and greatest success to you and all your listeners.